Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. Well, welcome to Face to Face, and today's interview is pretty interesting. I think you're going to really enjoy Robert Shirkey. He's a lawyer who has become quite the environmentalist. He wants us to think about global issues. He wants us to act municipally. He wants to talk about incrementalism and about incentivizing people to change, and he talks about markets today being complacent, and he talks very specifically about getting warning labels on gas pumps. I think you're going to enjoy Robert. Make sure you take the time to listen in. Don't forget to purchase my hot and best-selling book, Real Change. It's on Amazon.ca. Sign up for the mindmarket.com. Check it out. I write a bi-weekly column there, as do many others. And I'm also blogging pretty regularly on Taking It Global. So I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Robert Shirkey, and we'll see you soon. So welcome to Face to Face. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Oakville, I guess. Robert Shirkey is our guest today. Thanks for joining us, Robert.
Thanks so much for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Kind of an ugly snowstorm yesterday. That's kind of interesting that we're going to be talking about the environment.
Yeah.
You know, mother/father nature threw a curveball at us.
That she or he did, yes.
That's right. Robert is the executive director of Our Horizon, and I love their tagline. It's, quote, think global, act municipal. It's kind of a taking that glocal phrase and turning it, is that glue municipal? Would that be the word?
That would be a first, but I think you're right. I think it would be gluman or glue municipal.
Glue municipal or something.
I'm not sure.
Do you know what? What I love about this show, Face to Face, is we're breaking ground all the time.
Yes,
so
we just invented a new word.
A new word. That's awesome. I had a professor years ago at the University of Guelph who basically said you need to invent a new word at least once or twice a month.
Okay.
I think that's actually not bad advice.
We can cross that off the to-do list. We've
done. Already
We're set.
We're done. Robert's a lawyer. He's founded Our Horizon. We're going to talk about climate. We're going to talk about environment. But he's also a public speaker. I think it's fair to say you're a change maker. In fact, Robert and I met at the Global Change Initiative 2014? Earlier this year.
Yeah.
Earlier this year. So this is a great event you want to keep your eye out for, the Global Change Initiative. Hopefully going to be happening again in 2015. He's on TEDx. He gives talks. And we're going to talk about glue municipality or glue municipalism. There you go. So climate's a big thing. Environment's a big thing. What exactly is Our Horizon doing to change the way I think about it? Yeah,
so I think given the nature of climate change, it tends to be one of these issues that we're less active on. So for a lot of us, it's kind of abstract. It's not something we think about day to day in the way that we might think of other issues that are then more, say, media-worthy in our mind space. There's also sort of this temporal aspect to it where we burn fossil fuels today, the consequences of which, though we're experiencing some now, largely won't be felt until the future. And of course, by the time we reach that point, well, it's a bit too late, right? So what I'm trying to do anyway through this simple tool, and starting to get traction now in different cities in Canada and in the United States as well. There's a nice announcement from the city of Berkeley, where just yesterday they effectively passed it into law. There's one tiny hoop that they have to go through, but it's basically been done now. So the idea is simple. We all gas up maybe once a week, and it's habitual. It's this innocuous act. It's something that we do in an unquestioning way. And my sort of thinking is, if on the demand side, if markets are complacent, if communities of people just do this week after week, then of course we'll have pipelines, and of course we'll have oil sands, of course we'll all have this infrastructure upstream if downstream we're just doing this habitually. So what I'm trying to do to sort of shake us out of our sense of complacency and help us connect the dots between our consumption of fossil fuels and climate change, is put climate change, call them warning labels or information labels, right on gas pump nozzles, where often right now you'll see little advertisements, say on a 3-inch by 3-inch square right on the nozzle. And the thinking is if you can use that space to help individuals make that connection, that's then a way of creating a little bit of dissatisfaction collectively with the status quo, and that then creates more impetus.
It's a nice way to put it. John Berger, in Ways of Seeing, said that the purpose of publicity is to create a marginal sense of dissatisfaction in the spectator, and that's kind of what you're talking about, right? You're saying, hey, maybe there's an incremental way here, a very simple way of getting somebody to question something just a little bit more.
That's exactly it.
Go a little bit below the surface.
You know, and there's a story I like to tell of my mom. She's sort of become my guinea pig on this project now.
Nice.
I will, this was a while ago, I was showing up for breakfast every morning, trying to catch her on a morning when her gas gauge was close to empty. Right. And so finally, you know, I catch her at breakfast, her gas gauge is close to empty, and I say, hey, Ma, let's hang out again later tonight. Can I come over for dinner? And here she is thinking, you know, I'm the sweet son that wants to spend time with her. Really, there's this ulterior motive, right? Which is, so I then came back, I checked, and the gauge is close to full. So I knew during her day, she went to a gas station to gas up. I asked her during dinner, so, you know, how was your day? Where all did you go today? And she says, well, it was fine. I went to work, I got groceries, and then I came home. And I asked her a few times, and even specific, can you think of any other side trips, anything small? Did you stop anywhere else? No, I went to work, I got groceries, I came home. Finally, I asked, by chance, did you stop at a gas station? And she thinks for a second, pauses, oh yeah, I gassed up, of course, you know. So I think where we're at in large part now is just on sort of downstream, it's habit, it's inertia, it's if you can create this sense of dissatisfaction with the status quo solution, if in that point you have someone who's gassing up where this non-event now becomes a thing, then all of a sudden, so if you're doing that, if I'm doing it, if your neighbor's doing it, and so on, I think you can sort of create this social environment in a community where we're now that much more open to change.
So is the label about just reminding me that this is going to have an impact? Is it asking me to donate money? Is it sending me to your website? What is there a call to action of any kind, or is it just, hey, don't forget what you're doing here?
Yeah, so so we've got some mock-ups, and so one example might be, I kind of model them after the tobacco labels.
Right.
So you can have an image of, let's say it's a species that might face extinction care of climate change. Maybe it's
listen, I think it's incredibly important, but that just strikes me as pretty funny. That here I am pumping my gas on a cold winter's day, and I'm looking at a species that maybe it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, it's got this little bit of this lefty tree huggish thing that people are going to critique you for.
Of course,
right? They're going to go, "Oh, come on, really? I'm pumping gas,
yeah."
Right? But I think it's brilliant to model it after the cigarette labels. I think that's exactly what it sounds to me like you're trying to do.
That's exactly it.
Big warning here. You know, we got to wake up, and whether you know what annoys me, and I can't say I'm an environmentalist, capital E, in the sense of I'm out advocating because you know I'm busy in the international development. Here's what I do, etc. But to say, you know, I'm very sensitive to it, and so I'm. But you can't, I don't know how anybody can say it's not having an impact of some kind.
Yeah.
If you don't recycle, or if you continue to, or if you drive the gas guzzler, you know, you keep emitting this into this closed system. Now what?
Yeah.
How can it not be affecting us in some way? So to completely turn, you know, your head and walk away, it's just insane to me. Like I don't get that at all. Whether you're a free market, obscene capitalist to the nth degree, or just an insensitive Marxist, right? If you want to go polarized on
you know. And one of the things that along those lines that I sometimes think of is I think we're still partly in almost this collective denial when it comes to this issue. And this is then a way of just sort of showing us, hey, this is a cost. We're just basically asking that, you know, the producer of a product to disclose some of the risks associated with the consumption of the product. Pretty reasonable ask, right? And so the thinking is, if you can sort of get people's heads out of the sand collectively. And I think, you know, we often, at least in Canada, discourse on climate change it does tend to be focused upstream. So people understand climate change as a problem of tar sands or oil sands. It's a problem of pipelines. It's a problem of all sorts of... I think that distancing, actually, it's something to make me comfortable so I'm not complicit.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a real similarity too to the work that I'm doing in development. Like one of the questions, I want to talk about empathy, and I want to talk about this idea of what you just said. You know, it's kind of, it's not something that's affecting me today. Isn't this about empathizing with the cosmos?
Yeah.
Isn't this about empathizing with the environment on some level? To say, like, one of the questions I have is, how do you get people to empathize with somebody who's not sitting right in front of them?
Right?
So if you're not bleeding on the kitchen table in front of me, I'm not going to offer you a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Of any kind.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a troubling metaphor. But anyway.
But yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I do completely.
Like my fence in my backyard's pretty high.
Yeah.
I have a tough time seeing my neighbors. So frankly, I don't give a rat's ass about
Yeah.
it. Right?
Yeah.
So how do we push that? And
Yes.
maybe it's, you know, labels on gas pumps, it's warning labels on cigarettes, etc. And for me as a philosopher, I'm all about creating more dialogue and stirring it up a bit, right? So,
well, what I love, and I would encourage your listeners to just Google Adam Smith's Theory of Moral Sentiments and read the first page of the first chapter, right, of that book. And he actually talks about empathy. He talks about interconnectedness. So that's not the term that he uses. And he even argues, at least in that book, that it is through sort of this moral faculty that we're able to kind of create wealth and you know, for all mankind, sort of a thing. And of course, I'm paraphrasing, I'm butchering that quote.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's amazing. So he writes about empathy, and I think, I mean, it's a muscle, right? And if there are cues in our social environment that sort of strengthen, that flex that muscle, then I think we can build on that. And one of the ways, too, that I frame this is a lot of people, and I do think we need to price carbon, I think that's a no-brainer, but a lot of people go to, well, that's the tool, right? Because if your worldview is we are these selfish, self-interested, you know, wealth-maximizing automatons, that's what we are. So the language that you use then to communicate these externalities to the marketplace it's a price signal, because that's what I respond to, because that's what I am, right?
Right.
What we're doing with this is we're essentially communicating externalities. So it could be drought and famine, extinction of species, you know, what have you, in a way that uses a different language, this qualitative, you know, image and text. So what the price signal tries to achieve in dollars and cents in this quantitative way, our idea communicates in a qualitative way using image and text. So in the same, you know, in the abstract, they're both communicating externalities to the marketplace. So they're the same in the abstract, but this uses a language that I think communicates with us in a way that activates that empathy muscle, and I think can transition us from, you know, not changing our behavior. We're actually, our response to changes in price in gasoline is fairly inelastic. So people that say, well, it's all about price, is actually not. It's not.
No, it's kind of not true. I mean, somebody who's addicted to cigarettes, I remember working with a guy who smoked quite heavily for years in construction, and he taught, I mean, that was it when we went from the couple of dollars a pack to like $8. There was this huge leap. And he said, listen, people need these, right? So they're going to pay whatever they charge. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. It's not just the market doesn't move just on a price point alone.
Yeah. No, and so this qualitative way of engaging the consumer at the point of purchase, I think is a better way, actually, of communicating that cost. And I think the response will then be, instead of, you know, just whining about the price of gas and, oh, we're being gouged again, but not changing behavior, I think what you might then see as a collective response, you might see some individual change. You might see someone nudged into, maybe I might consider public transit a bit more if it's the summer, you know, and I go to the gym to do a cycling class. Maybe I'll ride my bike to work instead, right?
Right.
But I'm more interested in this collective change where if you can engage consumers in this way, communicate these externalities and the harms associated with the use of this product, then I think we can transition to a place where we're saying, well, but what am I supposed to do? What are my options? And why isn't business delivering better solutions? Why fuel economy, believe it or not, hasn't changed in over 100 years. Cars on the road today get the exact same mileage as the Ford Model T did in 1908 when it first came off the assembly line. And so the thinking is, you know, to the extent that necessity is the mother of invention, if you can create a little, you know, greater sense of collective necessity in a community, in a marketplace, then a business like GM, Ford, etc., that really their proposition is they're trying to create a mobility solution, right? They'll then say, okay, look, there's this segment in the marketplace that's not satisfied, not being catered to. We want to capture that, or our competitors will, so let's invest R&D dollars into bringing that prototype that we always bring out to shows. Let's actually develop that, bring it to market. You'll also see potentially, say in a place like Oakville or in a place like Toronto or wherever, where conversations are happening on public transit, on smarter planning for communities, on bike lanes and so on. This is then sort of a stimulus, another input that can help inform that conversation. Maybe we might then collectively be a bit more open to, yeah, let's pitch in for public transit.
It seems to me it's adding to or creating a more robust kind of conversation, right? So it's another, what do people like talking points? It's another way of keeping it in the conversation, in the dialogue. I guess the cynic in me says, don't we all just love the status quo? So
yes.
I mean, even though I don't think you'd see too many people wearing ththose T-shirts or too proud to wear a T-shirt that said, I love the status quo. I don't know. At the risk of going all negative on everybody, it's comfy. There's a laziness to it, I think.
There is.
Or maybe it's just simpler that way, Structure, framework, this is the way I live my life. I drive to work, I eat from 9 to 5. These are the things, and this is empathy. Right?
Yeah.
Because really, we're talking now about, well, you don't care about the future enough to think about it today.
Yeah.
Right? And I find that deeply troubling on a certain level. But how do you shock people out of their complacency?
And that's the thing. Like, we're up against some deep programming. So when I think of when I was born, I was then driven home in this car. Every single day I wake up, there's a car in the driveway. I walk down the sidewalk. So our transportation solution, I've only ever seen one thing my whole entire life, and it's hard to picture something, another possibility, right? It's, well, this is the way things have always been, this is the way they are. Of course, this is the way they will always be. And unless if you're challenging that, unless if you're creating some discomfort with that, it's harder to introduce an alternative if there's no space for it. If we're just complacent with the status quo, this effectively creates a little bit of dissatisfaction with the status quo, then creates more space for alternatives. And of course, I think, related, but a little distinct from that, is it stimulating demand for alternatives. So it creates space for it, but we're also now collectively more interested
I do a ton of work in Cambodia, and one of my favorite places in the world. Most of my listeners will know that already. Pretty much, my title of my autobiography is going to be All Roads Lead to Phnom Penh.
Okay.
The heck with Rome. So right now, they've just implemented, I was there about 5 weeks ago, they've re-implemented a public transit system. Well, Cambodia's a very interesting place in the world. I mean, the traffic's insane, incredible amount of motos, you've got your tuk-tuks, you've got bicycles, cyclos coming out of Vietnam. So a lot of different modes of transportation. So they implement this thing about 1.5 years ago called public transport, 2 buses in the whole city of about 1.5 million people. Totally fell flat.
Okay.
Didn't work at all. And it's incredibly cheap. It's,
Yeah.
I don't know, 15 cents to ride this thing. It's really, really cheap. And they've re-implemented it, and apparently it's sort of starting to work.
Interesting.
But they don't, this idea of public transport, it's like, well, I wave somebody down and I pay them and they'll take me there. Or I remember being in Mongolia. You would put your arm out on the side of the street and a guy would pull over, and you don't, not a taxi.
Yeah.
Just somebody on their way somewhere else. They'd pick you up, you'd give them some money, and off they would go. Well, it's interesting, right? Trying to shift the culture in Cambodia to, well, hang on, I want to stop here.
Yeah.
And so this idea of actually having bus stops along the way, it's foreign, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. They're shifting to a whole other kind of way of looking at it. You know what I'm saying? And like it's just another take on this breaking out of a framework.
Yeah, and so much of our obstacles, I think, is it's the breaking out of the framework. It's this cultural thing. It's not as if we don't have technologies that we can transition to. Renewables have, over the last 25 years or so, if you look at the price of solar over the last 25 years, it's just dipping and dipping and dipping. And if you look at how much more efficient, how much more productive it is, it's just going higher and higher and higher. There was one report I read that suggested 2016 in the majority of United States, the price of solar is going to reach grid parity with coal-powered energy, right? And that's even, including all the subsidies that fossil fuels get and everything. So it's not as if we're not capable of dealing with this problem. We are. My thinking, again, going back to your first question, so what's the idea here, is I see, so here we are in this place, here's the status quo, here's this place that we need to transition to because we've altered the chemistry of our planet. We're just kind of stuck on this space. And so there's some compelling solutions that people are delivering. And if you think of how this piece of the puzzle, what I'm advocating for, the warning label and the gas pump, how it fits into this more holistic sort of, how are we going to tackle this problem? It's making us less satisfied. So we're trying to get people less satisfied with the status quo while other people are delivering the solutions to try and get us more interested in this other sort of, compelling place that we need to transition to. And I think obviously both are important, but we need to hasten that transition just by virtue of the simple fact that we're running out of time.
So I've talked about this many times because I think it's an interesting approach. This idea, again, we're back to empathy. How do you care for others? How do you care about your neighbor, etc. Outside of your framework, outside of your family, let's say. I'm busy enough with my kids, my wife, my mom, etc. Paul Hawken in The Ecology of Commerce talks about a woman who's in the middle of washing the dishes, maybe the phone's ringing and she's got a baby crying, and somebody knocks on the door and they're there to talk about the environment.
Okay. Yeah.
The last thing in the world that's on her mind. And she goes, you know what, sorry, I got no time for that, and slams the door. Major paraphrase, and I'm sure I'm missing some nuances of Hawkins in his book. But I think it's a good example. So and now extrapolate that. Could be any number of things. Could be Cancer Society. Could be child sponsorship. Could be your Rotary Club. You're in the middle of your own thing, right? How do you get out of that? How the heck do we get out of that?
Wow, and isn't that's the question?
Well, it really is.
Exactly,
for people like us who
yeah.
are about social change and who are trying to change the way people think, and hopefully, the market's going to come along. And how does business and the nonprofit world work together? How do mining companies start to talk with the UNs of the world and the UNICEFs to say, maybe there is a better way to do this. Yes, mines are going to continue. But let's change some of the way we think. Let's change some of the way we do this. And I don't know. I think it's about the conversation. But I'd love to hear what you think about that single mom who slams the door in your face.
Well, I think, and so, I don't. That's the $1 million question, right?
I don't either.
But
I don't either.
I think perhaps the more we can just so say with the warning label on the gas pump, the more you're able to just in maybe a subtle, gentle way expose people to this thing. So then that could be a way of building that sense of empathy, and that parent that's busy and has 20 different things on their plate. So this might not be the issue that they tend to, just because they're just not able to, and that's fine. But I think if, at least at some level, we feel that much more connected to this problem, we feel that much more of a need to address it. So when the issue does come up, say even if it's an election, and if you have someone that's not interested in climate change at all and is saying, well, we don't want to pay for public transit and so on, well, this is now an opportunity for the person to say, yeah, I've been concerned about this thing, and this is now my opportunity to exercise my opinion on this thing. And there's this other politician that says, well, I'm actually quite concerned about climate change, and I think that person will represent my voice better. So I think the ask potentially can be quite small. And again, going back to what I was saying before, where it's tricky right now to create to sort of incentivize people to make that individual behavioral change. But I think, again, if you can create sort of more broad dissatisfaction with the status quo solution, that almost is the end game. Like, let's just get people just a little frustrated, a little uncomfortable, and then business and governments will respond. And for that auto company that refuses to adapt, that continues to make the same thing they've always been making, there's going to be a new market entrant. There's going to be Tesla, whose model, they're trying to get their cars cheaper and cheaper with every new, version that they come out with. Eventually, it's going to be comparable in price, and then all of a sudden, hey, finally, here's a solution, and you're going to see this huge shift.
I'm an electrician by trade. I'm not on the tools, but I still work for family and friends. I was at a friend's yesterday helping them out with something, and two things about that. One, I'm in the attic and breathing in that pink insulation fiberglass, which I'm sure one day we'll find out causes some sort of crazy disease, like asbestos did 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And I'm breathing that in and I'm thinking, okay, nobody would put up with this. So
Yes.
once we've destroyed the planet enough that we're breathing this kind of air, maybe then we'll start thinking
Yeah.
differently. So that's one thought
Yeah.
coming out of this. And then the other one is he's got this massive plug in his garage. We're looking for something electrically. And I make some comment, oh yeah, the guy had a shop in the garage.
Okay.
But I'm thinking about buying an electric car. So I'm going to leave that there because I'm pretty sure I'm going to need that in the near future.
Isn't that interesting?
Never heard anybody say that before.
Wow.
I mean, it's just, you go, okay, that wouldn't have been a part of the conversation 20 years
Yes.
ago. Nobody would have been saying that in the West.
Yeah.
So you got to, on some level, celebrate that and say, okay, maybe those warning labels on the gas pumps and on the cigarette packs, that kind of incremental change is actually making a difference.
Totally. And to that, I mean, it's the classic, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right,
So
right.
every little thing just nudges us that much more in the right direction.
We're back to sort of the conversation, right? Shaping the questions people are asking, shaping the dinner conversation that you might have with your kids or your friends that you're inviting over because you're drinking organic wine. Well, isn't this wonderful? Or isn't this odd?
Yeah.
Right?
It's amazing. And even how you're saying, you know, Lord knows what you're inhaling when you're up in that attic, right?
And it's awful. And I mean, I've been hacking it up for the last 18 hours, right?
Yeah.
Since yesterday. And you go, geez, what?
Well, this is, you know.
And then I think, of course, I'm a film nut, so I go to movies like Blade Runner, right? The dystopic.
Oh, God,
where we're
yes.
heading, right?
Well, it's, so I think of, I remember being a kid, actually, and I was reading this dystopic sort of a sci-fi novel where the air was such that it was so polluted, people are having to wear masks to breathe.
Right. That's what made me think of it, yeah, the mask guy.
Yeah, and then, so I go home, this is, I don't know what grade I'm in, grade 4 or something, school bus takes me home, I flick on, or my grandmother's watching the Weather Channel, or the Weather Network or something, and there's an advisory there that says, you know, don't have your kids go out and play between these hours, don't exert yourself. There's a smog advisory, right?
Right.
And here I am reading the sci-fi book saying, wait a second, no, this isn't cool at all. But I think, again, going back to what I'm suggesting some of our challenges are, it's inertia, it's habit. This is now normal. But to think about it, so where I live in downtown Toronto, I step on the sidewalk and not 6 feet from my face, from my nose, car after car after car with their tailpipe pointing this exhaust at me. And I'm breathing it in. It's going into my lungs. It's being circulated through my blood. Car exhaust alone, so forget about climate change. It's been linked to leukemia, cardiovascular disease, you know, asthma, all sorts of things. And to objectively look at this, you'd say, well, no, this is not acceptable. We can do better. But it's become so normalized, we don't question it, right? So part of the idea, again, is just, I think, as you said too, the sense of complacency. If you can shake people out of this sense of complacency, there's a, you know, the quote, of course, is, if you build it, they will come. And people often tell me, we just need better options and then they'll come. My thing is, we have to first almost want people to have it, then we build it, then it will come. Because as long as downstream markets are complacent, why would an auto company spend money to retool their plant, to come up, you know, I think it's critical at first you almost stimulate demand for that solution, then politicians will have that political license.
So for me, the whole notion of environmentalism kind of goes back to your comment about Adam Smith and the theories of moral sentiments, because you know, I don't know Adam Smith that well. I certainly read him over the years, and I have a friend who jokes about him with me all the time. But it kind of presupposes a center, a foundation, a moral fiber of a sort that says, I care enough to care about my neighbors even though my fence is 8 feet high.
Yes.
I can still get a ladder. It's going to cause me some energy. I'm going to have to exert, go to the garage, get the ladder, step up and look into their backyard. That's work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We don't want to do that necessarily, but I think this idea of being an environmentalist or being a neighborist, there's another word. You know,
and we're all neighbors, aren't we?
We are.
Yeah.
In one way or another, global or local, right?
Yeah.
To do that, though, I think presupposes some kind of foundation, right? So what I want to get to, Robert, is I want to get to where the mining executive, the barracks, and the Suncors and so on of the world are saying, sitting around a boardroom table, okay, yes, we got to make lots of money. Of course, that's what we're here for. We're going to change the world. We're going to create wealth. But for the love, can we try to do it in the most sensitive way possible? And when I mean sensitive, I don't mean emotionally. I mean, just, can we not be a little more careful?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, come on, really? Is it really that hard?
You know what?
You know, so you're going to make 1.2 billion this year instead of 1.3. Really?
Yeah.
Like, you know?
Well, I mean, even if your beginning point, which I think is quite sensible, you know, do no harm, right?
Yes.
So yes, let's create value, let's make wealth, let's live comfortably, let's all,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
let's have profit, but within certain constraints.
Yeah.
And that's where, quite frankly, government steps in to create. They're setting the rules. They're the
Yep.
referee.
Yep.
Maybe
This
the
is where
courts.
taxes come into play.
Yeah, you know,
boundaries,
and then
rules.
and let's have private enterprise operate within those boundaries, within those constraints, to pursue profit. But it's this piece, you know, it's the do no harm piece within certain constraints. So it's not like, I mean, I foresee and I really hope that fossil fuel companies begin to see and understand themselves as energy companies, and fossil fuels are actually just one particular method of delivering that energy. And if they can conceptualize of themselves in that way, I think it's that much easier then to transition to, well, let's invest in renewable energy, let's develop that. And quite frankly, if they don't, mind you, you know, it's something like 80% of energy right now does come from fossil fuels globally. But eventually, as this transition happens, if their culture, if their history, if their hard assets is all on extracting stuff from the earth so we can burn it, they're not going to make that transition.
Right.
And there's going to be people out of work. So if we can, you know, and that's, no one wants to see that, right? But I think if we can, and again, the connection maybe to the label could potentially be, to the extent that we deny climate change and we sort of avoid the inevitable, and the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, even Mark Carney recently, former governor of the Bank of Canada, has said, if we're to, you know, not totally disrupt our climate, if we're to abide by this sort of 2-degree centigrade figure that countries all over the world have agreed to, care of this UN convention, if we're to do that, we're going to have to leave the vast majority of fossil fuels underground. So if you realize that's where we're headed, if you realize people in China, a market of 1.3 billion, are looking for clean energy solutions, they don't want to breathe, you know, dirty air, they're not interested in climate change, there's a tremendous market opportunity to investing in those solutions today.
There totally is. I mean, I look at a country like Cambodia, one of the things that irritates me to no end is that the Canadian government has kind of pulled away. They're no longer a priority country, embassy closed, etc. One of the things I want to do in the future is advocate on behalf of business in Cambodia. And why isn't Canada there? Because you're right, there's this massive opportunity. I don't think we can say the Global South is just going to start burning more fossil fuel. That's too easy. I think maybe if there's some sort of incentive, if there's a little more creativity involved, there could be this massive wealth creating opportunity in some of these countries to say, you know what, we're not going to go the easier route, we're going to actually come up with a solar response or whatever the case might be. And I know to this harsh economist right now, I'm sounding like some crazy flaky idealist. I get that. But for crying out loud, you are the market after all. I'm going to toss your argument back at you and say, think better. You know,
totally.
You know, dig a little deeper for heaven's sake, but leave the fossil fuel in the ground.
Well, I mean, do you invest in a model that is old and I think doesn't have a future? You can't reconcile addressing climate change and developing all of your fossil. Those two don't fit, right? So if you accept that reality, and part of this the signal, really, I think of the warning level as a market signal. If you're like, okay, so this is reality, how then do we adapt? How then do we adjust? You'll then see, I think, wouldn't it be wonderful if Canada were to actually develop some of the technologies that the world is then thirsty for? We're now, just by care of this foresight, exporting the stuff years down the road and benefiting. You know, we're having better jobs, our economy is strong, and so on. It's just a matter of really.
Well, look at mobile phones. So the whole the lack of the need for infrastructure or a certain kind of infrastructure in many countries in the majority world. So you don't need that cabling. You don't need that underground cabling or overground cabling in a country like Laos or Cambodia because everybody's got a cell phone because we've got
They've
satellites.
leapt over that
They've
whole.
Totally leapt over. So how can you apply that to environmental issues, etc. Right? And I think it's across the board. It's development, but again, for me, I go, hang on. This presupposes a moral sentiment that says "do no harm." Kind of to borrow some phrases that you've been using. Great conversation. I'm loving our conversation today, by the way. So you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
Don't lawyers just care about creating wealth? Aren't they just like free marketers? Like
Sure.
through? What happened to you along the way?
Yeah, what happened to me? Well,
I watched The Good Wife.
Well, now I feel like I need to watch The Good Wife to get that reference.
Yes,
so that's
yes,
another thing we're adding to the to-do list.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I do think, you know, and obviously I'm just teasing, but yes, there's a huge wealth opportunity here if we actually do transition to renewables. And I love the Gretzky quote, which is totally overused. You know, don't skate to where the puck has been, skate to where it's going to go.
Right.
So that's how we need to think. But so how did I get into this? So I used to practice, I'm still a lawyer, though I'm no longer practicing. I'm sort of effectively in-house counsel for this not-for-profit, Our Horizon, that I incorporated about 2 years ago. And I found myself, so I used to work for a municipality as the assistant city solicitor and prosecutor. I opened up my own practice then in Toronto for a period. And I wasn't happy with the work that it was fine and it was interesting, but there was this lack of meaning to it, you know?
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I would watch in action, you know, in communities across Canada federally, the world really, on climate change, and just watch from the sidelines with concern. And I had a few ideas that I actually wanted to run on municipally in Toronto, where I'm from, on sort of like a climate change friendly type platform. But I had to backburner that just because running your own practice is busy. And so I find myself with a lot of these ideas, you know, on maybe we can do X, Y, and Z to address climate. This warning label campaign is one of them. It's been backburnered. I'm at work. I'm not that happy. And I was having a conversation with my grandfather. This was in the summer of 2012. And the way the conversation ended, I think he sensed that I would spend every summer on his farm in Saskatchewan, and he knows that I'm concerned about these issues. And so we're having this conversation. He's sensing that I'm unhappy with work and sensing that I want to pursue other things. And his last words to me on that phone call were, well, you have to enjoy what you're doing, Rob. Do what you love. And it was around that moment where a client was coming in.
That was your grandfather?
My grandfather, nice. Yeah. A farmer in Saskatchewan, 95 at the time. And so I said, thank you. You know, I've got a client coming in and I'll talk to you again soon. So, you know, he was in okay health, but he's 95, right? So he actually passed away 2 weeks after.
Wow.
Yeah. And that lingered. His last words to me,
of course they did,
you know, do what you love. And here's someone that I really, you know, looked up to and admire.
It's a great story.
Yeah. So
that's got to be in the introduction of your first book.
When I get to it. Yeah.
Seriously, that's an awesome story. That's really cool.
So it gets
well, and good for him for A, saying it, B, that you guys had the relationship where he felt that he could, and that at a 95, he's thinking that way.
You know,
right?
He's an amazing person. He actually, so he had a big swath of farmland. He donated a chunk of it to Ducks Unlimited. It's now like a preserve for animals and so on. But so
there's an environmental ethic in your family. Clearly.
I think there is.
Clearly.
I think there is. Yeah.
Because I was going to say, like, this is wonderful, but where did it come from?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you care about, I don't know, homelessness in Toronto over the, you know?
Yeah.
Or maybe you do.
And I do.
I'm sure you do. But you know what I mean, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and so the story then, I think there's actually another piece that is that much more, and hopefully is a bit more universal.
Yep.
So I then, 2 months go by, and so there I am at my desk at my former law firm, and I get this envelope in the mail, and it's from my uncle who's a lawyer in Saskatchewan. I just thought it was some correspondence, but I open it up and I pull out what's a check from my grandfather's estate. I'm oh my goodness, this is from my grandfather. And it was a small sum, but I remember looking at it. As I'm pulling it out of the envelope, I hear his voice in my head from about 2 months prior, do what you love. And I thought, you know what, this buys me 2 to 3 months of I don't have to worry about paying bills. I could go on a holiday. I could do, you know, what do I love? And I think in that moment I recognized, no, this is an opportunity. So it was actually that day I decided to pick one of these ideas. So I actually have a few other campaigns that I want to run that I think are also as interesting. But I just decided, well, let's pick one idea up off the back burner. Let's go explore the legal research. Let's, you know, can a municipality do this? Is there enough precedent to support this? Does it conflict with anything federally or provincially and so on? So I'm trying to figure this out, and I'm saying, oh, this could actually work. A city might be able to do this. And I've produced a 40-page legal report on our website that a counselor can download if they like, that explores that question. And then I'm getting into the psychology of it, the interesting economic theory. And I reached this point where I'm like, what do I do with this? It was very organic. The organization that I then incorporated was more of a, well, I need some sort of a vehicle through which I can advocate for this. So fast forward and here we are. But I think the most interesting point, and this is the piece that hopefully might be a little more universally understood, is I remember being, so maybe a week after he passed away, I was in Saskatchewan, and I'm at the cemetery where he's buried, and so here's this fresh pile of dirt. The tombstone isn't there yet, right? And next to him is my father, who he had passed away a few years prior. And so I'm looking at this fresh patch of dirt, and these things, do what you love, are sort of going through my head.
Yeah, sure.
There's my father right beside him, and beside my dad is an empty patch of green grass, right? And so some people, I've talked to people that have had this a similar moment where you almost appreciate your sense of mortality, and you start to ask the bigger questions, right?
Yeah, well, that would be a cradle to grave moment. That would be, right? Yeah.
And so, well, okay, my time here is limited. And all of it, it's limited for all of us.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do? What do I value? What do I, and so that's kind of the genesis of this. And I recognize too, a lot of my friends are having kids, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and so on. And it truly is the decisions that we make today that will shape their future.
So many people believe in macro change, and I'm an incrementalist. So I'm all about the little things, and you got to do them, and they build, and it's tipping point stuff, and so on. It's foundational, though, at the same time. But I think any macro change has got to be a series of smaller decisions and choices along the way. So, but what's amazing about that story is wonderful, by the way. But what's amazing to me is that it affected you the way that it did, because I bet you there have been many people who have been in a situation similar, different parents, grandparents, different things were said, different moments, but it didn't affect them in the same way. It didn't impact, and we're back to maybe the empathy again. The timing was right for you. The single mom at the door, maybe on another day, she would have been open to a conversation with you at the door, right? So it's about timing to some degree, I think. Guys like us, anyone that's trying to shift the conversation, timing's pretty key.
It is.
And I think sometimes us in the sort of nonprofit want to change the worldview have trouble realizing that, and so we get up on a mountaintop and we shout and we point fingers and we just alienate people along the way, right?
Yeah.
I don't get that sense from you at all, by the way. You're really normal.
Right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Hooray, normal.
So, well, what I love too is you are the metaphor for collaboration.
Yeah.
You're this, I was gonna make a lawyer joke.
Oh, go for it.
But you're this, this lawyer. You're making lots of coin. You got this corporate edge. You're wearing your suit, your clients, and so on. But you've clearly got this moral sentiment. Thanks, Adam. That says we got to change the world. And now you're bringing the two together. You're what Julia Molden would call a new radical.
Interesting.
Somebody who's gotten to a point in their life where, okay, I'm done with that.
Yeah.
And okay, there's meaning in that, and it's important, and I help people as a lawyer and so on. But I just want to take it up a notch, right? I'm just not as satisfied as I used to be, and I hope that the millennials and the younger generations of the world are moving more in that way. And it's not about lack of commitment; it's about a sense of purpose, right? Yeah,
and that's what it comes down to for so much. It's purpose, and it's asking the bigger questions.
It is.
What do I value? What am I doing with my time? And as you put it, timing, right? So for me, it was a confluence of factors. There's a message from someone who I really love and admire and look up to. There's this opportunity of who gets that? It was $7,500. So not a huge sum, but still, that buys me time.
Of course it does.
And who gets 2-3 months to explore something?
It's true.
It's not,
I love the fact that you looked at it as an opportunity and that it was a gift. And, well, what I also love too is it sounds to me like you took somebody else's grace and generosity and have turned it into your own understanding of what that grace and generosity might look like for you globally and municipally, right?
The glow municipal.
I don't know. I'm going to try to spell that. I might
we'll work on that.
Yeah, and I might put that in the blurb too when I introduce it.
Yes.
We coined this new word.
Okay.
Yeah. Because heaven knows that if anyone makes any money off it someday, we need to.
We need to trademark that. That's our new word.
Can we agree on 50-50 though?
Well, 50-50. Sure. Yes.
Yeah. Listen, we got to wrap up here real soon. What can so love your passion, love where you're trying to go with all this. What's next? Not for you necessarily, but what's really pressing? So climate change is so big, right? It's so ridiculously huge. You're all about incrementalism.
Yes.
What am I doing about it? What can I do about it?
Well,
and tell me about maybe just a little bit more about Our Horizon and how people can get involved.
So the website is just ourhorizon.org. People can get involved. So I'm actually working on, it's a really interesting space, the not-for-profit sector. So the nature of the advocacy that I'm doing would constitute, what the CRA deems to be political purposes. So I'm advocating for legislative reform, and I'm telling people they should approach their municipal government to do that.
Right.
So I don't qualify for charitable status. That then means, though, that all the foundations in Canada that look for that charitable status to get that tax receipt, I don't get access to that pool of funds.
Right.
Governments were still a little too, we're questioning fossil fuels. Is this safe politically? Can we support?
Sure. Yeah.
So my challenge right now mostly relates to capacity. I'm spread thin, and that is sort of then informed by just a lack of funds, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So what I'm hoping to do, if anyone wants to donate, we have a donate button on our website. $10, $20, it actually helps. But what I'm putting together is a larger, I'm calling it a prospectus, where hopefully it'll be out by the end of December. I'm trying to beat that deadline. But what I'm asking then people to do is to say, hey, look at this thing. It's sort of the pitch. It's the game plan. If I can have someone working for me full-time in BC, if I could have someone working for me full-time in Quebec on the East Coast, and then I'm just empowering people, and they then are on the ground are empowering others to bring this forward in their own community. Because the model is, and this is another thing I like about it, is I actually don't want to go city to city to make the pitch. I can be there, and I'd love to answer questions from staff and counselors, and I can do longer hour-long talks to sort of really share the info. But I remember being a teenager and being frustrated about this issue, about other environmental issues, and, well, what do I do? And so I'm trying to tell youth, hey, municipal government is so approachable, and even if you're 16, even if you're not old enough to vote, you can actually ask to get an item on an agenda, and you can speak to it for 10 minutes. You could pitch this. So what
it's good. Great advice.
And what I need to do then is to have greater capacity to talk with youth across the country, talk with counselors to answer their questions, and so on. So for anyone who's interested in supporting, the best way is, as soon as this document is out, if you know any philanthropist, if you know people that are concerned about climate change and might be well connected, take this document and just forward it to them and say, this is interesting, have a peek at this. And I like to think too, in terms of a marginal return on a dollar invested, if I hire just one person, we've doubled the organizational capacity, So a dollar here has a lot of value.
Sure.
So that would be the biggest ask. Otherwise, just approach their counselors and say, hey, this is something interesting. Listen to the podcast. Maybe we might want to do this.
I remember having a coffee with Jeff Knoll locally. He's the counselor in our ward, and he said, you see that curb over there? I was responsible for that. And if you want to get involved, this is where you do it.
Totally.
Municipal politics, you get to see what's happening. You see the need immediately.
Yeah.
And not that we don't want to be involved globally and so on, but it's a great way to do it. Robert Shirkey, our guest today, the Executive Director of Our Horizon, Think Global, Act Municipal. Check him out online. He's got a TED Talk. There's a petition to sign. There's a legal report. Might be able to book him to come to your high school.
I would love to do that.
That would be awesome. So check out Our Horizon. There's a donate button. I think the word is Globa Municipalism.
Yes, that's where it's at.
That's one of them. That is the future, man.
Every time someone says that, you owe us what? $1?
That's right.
Every time,
Get on board, damn it, is our new bumper sticker.
Awesome.
So, thanks for joining us today, Robert.
Thanks for having me.